Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and the Pokemon TCG at the start of the game, you do your stuff, right? You shuffle your deck, you draw your starting hand of 7 cards, and if you have a basic Pokemon there, you put it down as your active. If you have, a few, you could choose, and you could bench Pokemon as well. And then if you don't, you reshuffle and mulligan. You obviously show your hand to your opponent there, so they know you're not cheating. And also, then you reshuffle. They get to draw an extra card. By the way, if you didn't know this, they get to draw for each mulligan. They get to draw a card. If you both mulligan, they cancel each other out, and they decide how many mulligans they want to take once. They don't get to draw and then see. And so that's how mulligans work. And then after that, you set up your prize cards, and then you start the game, right? You also you roll to see who goes first as well. I actually forgot that, but that's how the Pokemon TCG works, right? Well, kind of. But this Cinderace actually lets you break that rule, which is kind of crazy. This card is a hilarious card. This card is a mediocre card, I'll be completely honest. We'll talk about how good it is, and it has some legitimate use cases, though. Looking at competitive play, it's seen some, I guess, but not really. However, we need to talk about what this card does first, right? First of all, it does have an attack here, Turbo Flare for 1 colorless, doing 50. Switch your deck for up to 3 basic energy cards. They can be of any type. You can mix and match. You attach them to your bench Pokemon in any way you like. Then you shuffle your deck here. So that's cool. You also have Free Retreat. You are a Stage 2 Fire Pokemon here that has 160 HP, weak to water, and surprisingly as well. Then we have the ability, which is the most interesting part about this card, which is called Explosiveness. This Pokemon is in your hand when you're setting up to play. You may put it face down in the active spot, as in you can start it as your active. You can't start it on your bench, but you can start it in your active like a basic Pokemon. And it's really interesting, the wording here as well, which says you may put it face down in the active spot. Not that you have to, but you can. And obviously, this is pretty unique. It's not completely unique. I will later talk about some cards that have been similar to this in the past that are also kind of funny. Some of them have been good. Some of them have been completely irrelevant, but Cinderace with Explosiveness is definitely a really unique ability here. This means that you can play it without needing to play the basics. We have seen cards in the past that also don't require you to have the previous evolutions to play the final evolutions. Obviously, I guess the most obvious example would be Rare Candy there, right? Rare Candy is a card that lets you skip the stage 1, but you still need the basic. You can also look at, for example, there's a Gengar. If it's in this card, you can just put it into play, and then you put some damage cards on it, and it was mostly used to damage itself, to be honest, but that's a card that does that pretty easily, and there are some others. However, the ability actually doesn't work once you start playing. It only starts while you're setting up, so it's bizarrely this ability that, again, is useless during the game and only affects the game before it starts. This is super unique, and as I was saying, it is a May ability, so presumably, this Pokemon, if you start it, it's essentially a basic, right? And as a basic, this card with Turbo Flare and Free Retreat, it's quite good. If this was just on a basic, it would be probably overpowered. It would see a bunch of play. Not completely broken, I wouldn't say. I guess. 160 HP, single price basic, that's already pretty good with Free Retreat there. So maybe it would be completely broken. I don't know. But if you don't start it and don't ever way to play it, then it's now a dead card. It can be used. You can discard it. You could search it out with Ultra Ball. So it's not a card that is, I guess, literally useless, but it's pretty much literally useless. So you want to get it out of there, right? This puts it in a very weird situation, but again, you probably want to start it because it's good to start. However, you don't have to. So you can choose, if you have a hand of Cinderace, and I'll just say 6 basic energy cards, then you could choose to start Cinderace, as it says, with the ability. You don't have to, though. So what if you do? Well, then you, from your opponent's perspective, you just start this Pokemon, and that's it, right? You start Cinderace there, and then your opponent doesn't suspect anything is up. I guess, quote, nothing's up, but you'll start this stage 2. You'll have actually no basics in play, which is kind of funny. And then you could actually have no basics and play the entire game. I will say I was playing a deck kind of similar to this, and I prized my only basic. That was kind of funny, kind of bad as well. But you are able to start this, and it functions just like a basic. On the other hand, you could choose not to start it. From there, you're going to mulligan. You'll show to your opponent you have no basics in it, because you don't. You do have a hand where you could start a Pokemon, but you're not required to start this. So Again, this being a May ability means you can start it or not start it. This gives you the option to mulligan. This is super interesting. Obviously, if you mulligan, then you don't know what hand you're going to get next, so it is risky. But on top of that, you are also giving your opponent a card. So that is definitely bad. You can theoretically play, and I'm sure some of you have done something like this, a deck with just one basic Pokemon where you have one consistent starter, or maybe even a deck like a quad deck like Quad Thorns, where you have 4 copies of a basic Pokemon, and then you're mulliganing a lot, have the consistent starter, but you're giving your opponent a bunch of extra cards that can be really bad for you because, like, obviously giving them extra cards is bad. So this Cinderace, if you choose to mulligan, it is very risky, but it does give you some control. In that situation where you had those 6 basic energy cards, and the Cinderace, you probably want to mulligan, right? That hand's pretty unplayably bad. This is super interesting. Obviously, this is funny, but how much, and good as well, being able to control mulligans, but how often does it actually happen? I actually don't know the math. I would say off the top of my head, there's a way to calculate it, but the more basics you have, the more likely you are obviously to have a basic in your opening hand. And if you do have a basic in your opening hand, you have to start it. If you don't have a basic, you don't have Cinderace, you have to mulligan. So the only situation this matters is we have Cinderace and no basics. So you want to put more Cinderaces in, you want to put less basics in, and even then you're still going to mulligan a bunch. I will also mention that there have been in the past some cards that are similar. As I said, I mentioned that earlier. There has been some overlap where you could have multiple cards like this. For example, in Expanded, you can. I guess tell me in the comment section as well if there are any decks you want me to play with this Cinderace mulligan strategy. I did a Tatsugiri deck. It was funny. It was quite terrible, but it was funny there. Additionally, there's just a bunch of funny things you can do with this in Expanded, so tell me if you have any ideas there. And also, while you're down there, make sure you like and subscribe, because that really does help support me. And also, it's just fun. But Cinderace, as I said, is fun if it works and you're in that situation, but you want to cut down on basics, which we need to talk about what this Pokemon actually does, because you can just use it as a Pokemon to control mulligans, but then it's a pivot, I guess. And that's it, right? You're not like really using its attack. So you want to actually be able to use its attack to get value out of it, right? The attack does, as I said, it accelerates energy, and it does some damage. The damage it does is okay. It'll knock out like Bidoos and stuff. To say and stuff, it's mostly just Bidoos. So this is cool enough. I mean, that's, it's fine, I guess. You see something like Solrock or Fan Rotom or something like that doing 70 for 1 on basic being decent. This has less damage, but it does have that energy acceleration, and the energy acceleration really is the shining point of this card. But it accelerates to your bench Pokemon. Even if it accelerated to itself, that wouldn't be good. This is where we take a look at how this card's actually been played, because it's not really used from the mulligan thing. We see it here with some expensive Pokemon, Archaludon EX, and Zoroark EX, I guess, and also Hydreigon EX. That one's pretty expensive. Apparently also with Zoroark EX, and then also Rustle. So apparently Cynthia's Garchomp EX. This seems bad, I'm not going to lie. But all of these builds, well, funnily enough, all of these decks aren't like super energy hungry. The most energy hungry one here would be this deck here, which is, this is a card, or this is a deck that allows you to have a lot of different options if you have the energy acceleration. Generally, you're using Crispin, but Cinderace allows you to accelerate turn 1 really, really easily there, right? So Cinderace is, well, easily if it's in play there. This is like the card TM Turbo Energize, which saw some play within Mega Absol Toolbox pre-rotation. Obviously, you can't play it now because it's not standard legal, but when you could have Cinderace filling a similar role as well. And post-rotation, you can choose to do that. Again, if you start it. However, again, this is a deck where you're making really good use of Turbo Flare. However, then you have like all these basics here. So you're not really going to have the opportunity to mulligan. And also, you're going to have less opportunities to start Cinderace here. And then you're just going to have these dead cards floating around in your deck throughout the course of the game. So the actual play and use cases of this card are very narrow, which is really unfortunate. In terms of doing the mulligan stuff, that's mostly gimmicky. Again, you're giving your opponent a bunch of cards, potentially. You're certainly opening yourself up to being able to do that. On top of that, have some control, but just a little bit of control. And it is useful for trying to assemble some combo, but combos in the Pokemon TCG are like okay. I mentioned Tatsugiri EX. Tatsugiri EX, if you pull it off, Terma going second, it's like okay, I guess. It's not that good. It's not bad, but it's okay, and you'll miss it still a bunch. And then also that's like one of the stronger combos, I guess. I'm trying to think. And then there were other good combos, just attacking the Mega Kangaskhan on the X turn and going second or something like that. But you can just do that, right? So most of the combos that are in the game are relatively doable, or like relatively doable with Cinderace, or just not really doable at all. Or sorry, relatively doable without Cinderace, or not doable even with Cinderace. So the use case of this card is very narrow. As I said, there are some similar cards, so I'll let me pull this up here. We'll use when setting for play. Will this give me the right set of Pokemon? That is the question. Looks like it does. Funnily enough, so I didn't mention this. You just need to run a basic. I didn't mention it because it's the rule, right? You can't run no basics in just Cinderace because it's not a basic. But there is this Luxray, this Manectric. Manectric only works going second. This card I don't think was very good, but it was in theme decks. There is this Snorlax style. This card is super terrible because what it does is not very much. It's you can actually start this on your bench, which is kind of funny. It has HP, but it doesn't have, like, you can't retreat it, and it doesn't give up any prizes, which is cool. But pretty much what happens is you start it, and then you just discard it. So it doesn't really do anything when in play, unlike Cinderace, which does do stuff. It can buy you some time, I guess, but really doesn't do that very well. And then could use it for the mulligan stuff, but again, that's not super useful in practice. And then we have this Luxray. This one's kind of similar to the well, it has the same ability as the Cinderace, and this card saw some play. It doesn't accelerate searches for trainer cards. That's decent. The Talonflame is actually pretty similar as well. This card was legitimately good, specifically with Greninja. Greninja was a good deck at the time. Greninja Break. I'm not going to dive into it in today's video, but Talonflame has the same ability as the Cinderace or as the Luxray there, and that is nice. But this Pokemon also has free retreat like those other two, which is good. But also it searches for cards, and the deck just didn't want to run a lot of basics. I didn't play this deck, I'm not going to lie, so I'm not overly familiar with how good it was, the Talonflame. But I know it was an option you want to start because it helped you set up some and just generally search the things you're looking for. So we have legitimately seen a card like this be good at one point. Not absurdly good, and still a little gimmicky, but definitely pretty decent here. So it is interesting to see if Pokemon will print more cards like this in the future. Well, looking at them, the time frame between them, Luxray, so Cinderace was Mega Era, the beginning of Mega Era. Luxray was the end of the Sword and Shield era, and then we saw Talonflame in the XY era. So if they continue along that path, it's going to be a little while till we see another one. If you count Manectric in there and Snorlax Stall, we had one of every era, but we're still like in the middle of the Mega Era. So it would be cool to see another card like these. Tell me in the comments section though if you've played Cinderace. As I said, this card's so fun. Explosive is legitimately a great word to describe it because it is a nice boost at the start of the game if you're able to start it. But it's definitely not super good. Unfortunately, it's mostly gimmicky, but it is very fun. But I hope you all enjoyed this video. Make sure you like and subscribe, because as I said earlier, that really does help support me and the channel. And also comment down below, of course, your thoughts on this. Also, huge shout out to my YouTube members for supporting me. But I hope you all enjoyed, and as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.